everybody, and welcome to University Readiness. Oh, let me start again. University Readiness, Academic and Life Skills for Success. A little bit tongue-tied there. Welcome, everybody. I'm really happy that you're here this evening. I think that this is a really important topic. Our kids are going off to post-secondary school, could be university, could be a college, could be anything in between. And there's some trepidation. There is some nervousness. There is some anxiety, both on the side of the parents and on the students. And tonight we're going to talk a little bit about that big jump from high school to post-secondary, whether it is university or college, and looking at the work demands, the level of independence that is needed. We also know that COVID has had a significant impact on the trajectory of both learning and maturation for our kids that have been caught in this time continuum. Tonight, we're going to talk about what we can do to set ourselves and our kids up for success, what we as parents can do to foster that independence, as well as what we can encourage our children to do. We're going to look at strategies that are proactive, so things that we can prepare and do ahead of time, as well as active, how students can engage with learning and grow independence throughout that first school year, and appropriately reactive. When we have to meet challenges, how can we meet them in the best ways possible? And the last thing we're going to look at tonight is different university support services that are available to students, both with and without diagnosed exceptionalities. Well, thank you for joining me, and I'm very excited that we have Dan Gullery here with us this evening. Dan's going to pop on. Hi, Dan.
Hello, everybody. Nice to be here.
Oh, I'm so glad that you're here. Dan is our senior learning specialist at Ruth Rumack's Learning Space, and he has expertise in test preparation and university transition. And why he is such an expert in this particular genre or field is that he is the co-creator of our post-secondary prep course. Welcome.
Thank you.
So let's get right into it. In your experience, Dan, what are parents of emerging adults, and I'm going to call them emerging adults, most concerned with?
Well, I mean, there are a lot of things. I would say in the context of university preparedness, really what we're looking at is the ability to get the work done. So, it is, like you said, a big shift from high school. So really we're looking at, the ability to take good notes, study for a test, keep the grades up, do well on those tests and exams and those kinds of things.
And in your experience, what do you think the students are mostly concerned about in this transition? Because it's going to be different.
Of course, and there is a bit of that, of course, that I think that is a piece of anxiety for a lot of students, but there's also the social side of things. So, there's really, the being on their own, that excitement, that anticipation, independence, meeting new people, making new friends, having these kind of temptations, whether they be positive or negative, coming from different places. But, they've heard a lot from their teachers at this point in high school about, what to expect from university. And a lot of that is valid. And a lot of it is kind of a scare tactics in a way.
There may be some myths out there. We'll talk about that later, won't we?
Yes.
So what do you think, what are some other concerns generally that parents and students might have?
So I think there's definitely like the underlying skills, that are sort of beyond the academics. There's sort of emotional preparation or emotional maturity in a lot of ways. And then there's sort of like I think we talk a lot about executive functioning, and I think a lot of these things fall under that umbrella, just, being self-sufficient, being able to prioritize things, having some kind of self-advocacy. And then, even the nitty gritty of like actually waking up and getting to class on time, or even getting to class at all, is a concern for, I think, more so for parents, but definitely, the time management and being able to do those kinds of things on the student side as well. Then there's also the social transition, like I said, in terms of making new friends.
So there's just so much going on. And I think that there are greater academic independence, financial, there are social expectations that students more than they've ever had to face before, right? So this conversation really reminds me of a meme that I saw, and it said, we ask 18-year-olds to make huge decisions about their career and financial future, when a month ago, they had to ask to go to the bathroom.
Yeah, exactly. That sort of hand-holding in high school, that is one of the key differences in terms of the transition. It's a big leap. And really that is why we had this idea to create the post-secondary prep course. We really wanted to delve into what the actual issues are that students are facing. And we wanted to really help our students work through those concerns, and find some kind of like personal and emotional growth on top of that. When we were creating it, we spoke to a lot of people who work in higher education. So we spoke with particularly people in student support services, just to get a feel for like, what are kids coming to you with in terms of their concerns and their issues? And then we also spoke to obviously a lot of the students that we work with personally, the post-secondary students that we work with. We've had sort of anecdotal feedback from them in terms of working with them one-on-one, but like, let's compile some ideas here. Like, what are the things that we're all experiencing? And that's sort of what allowed us to create this course, and run it as it is.
I'm so glad that we did create it, because as you said, we're not just basing this on what our experiences were in university or post-secondary, which,
It was a long
things have
time ago.
changed.
Yes.
For me, it's a really long time. So things have certainly changed and the expectations are different. I mean, we have a general idea, but just the way that the things move and well, we're going to get into all of that. Let's start at the very beginning. How can we as parents be proactive and set our kids up for success even before the first term of that post-secondary education begins? Where do we start?
Yeah, there's 3 months before we start. So I would say, really one of the big things is just having open conversations with young adults, with your kids. Talk to them about what they're excited about and what they're concerned about. Really one of the things that we hear most often from students in terms of their own anticipation is just being excited about the freedom that they have, that they will have, but also having a little bit of anxiety in terms of being on their own and, what that means. And, that may be, like I said, waking up on time and getting to class when you're used to having mom or dad there doing that. Or it may just be, I don't know how to do laundry. There's a lot, there's just a list of things that students are anxious about, when they get over the honeymoon phase of being on their own. So I would say, yeah, sorry, Ruth, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that it's something that, and our kids may tell us a little bit about what they're anxious about, but they may not be able to verbalize it completely either. So that's where those open conversations and sort of sentence starters help us to get those conversations started.
Sure. And I think on the university end, one thing that we can do as either parents or adults who work with kids or who are supporting these kids is to help them navigate, these university websites, which can be really overwhelming when you go and look at a university website. But, just to find, and this is something that we do in the post-secondary prep course, we call it a scavenger hunt. So whichever university your child is planning on attending, find those things, find those services, those I guess the resources that are out there within the university. So, that can be the academic support center, the writing center, somewhere you can go to help with study skills, health and wellness, all of these different places, athletics, multi-faith, the multi-faith center, wherever you're sort of where your concerns are, or where you feel like, even just to show a kid, hey, all of these things are here for you. And, this is actually going to be an easier transition than maybe you're anticipating, because there is that support network that's there.
I think that all those supports are really, in some cases, hidden. I mean, on the first week of class, when you have your orientation, you're going to hear from different clubs and you're going to hear from different services on campus. But if you take the time to do it a few months ahead of time, I think knowing about these resources and the centers and where to find them, it really does create another level of excitement, but it can also reduce the anxiety, because these services are highly accessible and they are there, open doors, waiting for students to come and use them. Yeah,
exactly. And in terms of that anticipation, and before the term actually starts, that first week can be quite hectic. Even just navigating the campus and finding where your classes are. One thing that we always recommend is that kids open Google Maps. If they're not there in front of the campus, if they're not visiting the campus already, open Google Maps. Almost every university is fully Street View accessible on Google, so you can walk from your dorm room to your first the hall where your first course is, and then to student services, and you can navigate that course on Google Maps and get a feel for, what's actually going on.
Isn't that like, I think that that's wildly amazing because, I mean, I'm just thinking back to my university career and having to, go from one end of campus to the other. It would take me half an hour to get from one place to the other. And then I didn't exactly know where I was going and which tunnel do I take and which turn do I take. So, I mean, the advantages that our kids have at this point are numerous. So
Yeah.
I love that idea.
And I think in a really gentle way, we can also talk about the sort of planning for or being proactive about safety when it comes to, using these kinds of maps, understanding what the fastest way back to your dorm is,
Yeah.
know where those emergency phones are and having that emergency number in your phone, even explaining to kids that you can request an escort to bring you home at night if you're in the library or something like that. That's something that's really important for students to know.
I think it's very important. Okay, so let's say we've arrived at that first day of classes. We've had the conversations, we're talking to our kids about what's happening for them. Now we're actually in front of all of this newfound freedom, but also the work that we've got to do. How can we help our first year students proactively prioritize their academic requirements? Because there's a lot.
It's a lot, and that's a great question. One thing that I really like to do is just to show a visual of what the chaos of organizing at the very beginning can actually look like. So we have this slide here, decoding the syllabus. So this is just one syllabus that you would get for one of your 5 courses. And there is so much information here. You're moving from a high school situation where there is an element of handholding. And here you're told this is the term. Everything that happens in this term is on this document. And you get 5 or 6 of these documents in your first term. And it's a lot to handle. So, when we're talking about doing that organization and, being proactive about being organized at the beginning, one thing that I really like to stress is that, students need to learn how to decipher these syllabi, and by doing that, decipher some of the sort of, the overwhelming amount of information that's put in front of them. So, and I'll talk about what we do in the course, in the post-secondary course that we run, but, this is universal. Taking all of those syllabi and organizing it into one document so that you have a clear-cut list of assignments that are due by due date. So it's not that you're ruffling through 5 or 6 different packets of information with sort of, some of them can be really nicely organized by the professor. Others can be totally chaotic. They come from the mind of the professor and they're going to reflect that. So, it's important to have your own system and to understand, where everything is and what's going on.
I think thinking about all of the different expectations, I mean, we know the university has far greater expectations than high school. And there is an unspoken ratio that we talk about, which is there's a 3-to-1 ratio, which means that most courses run, or most courses or classes run 3 hours per week on a schedule. The unspoken ratio is there's an approximately 3 to 4 additional hours for every 1 hour of class. So if we do the math for that, 5 courses at 3 hours each gives us 15 hours of classes, potentially, if you're taking a full course load. And if we're using the ratio of 3 hours of additional work for every 1 hour of class, that's an additional 45 hours of work that a student is expected to be putting in order to keep up with their studies. Now, I mean, give or take a little, that includes the readings, additional readings, assignments, labs, but it doesn't necessarily include extra essays, your midterm essays or the big papers. So what suggestions do we have that make this a little easier?
Yeah, no, and I think just to contextualize that a little bit, we talk about the magic number of 25 quite often when we're talking about maturity and adulthood, and that 25 is when your brain is fully developed, which is
age 25. Age 25.
Yeah, age 25. Yeah. And that may or may not be true by a couple of years, but really what we're talking about here is 17, 18-year-olds being expected to organize a massive amount of information. And I think if we asked most adults to organize that amount of information without systematizing it in a different way on their own, they would fail miserably. And so we can't expect students to be able to do that as well. And that's really why, we emphasize the full list of things that's going on. So your list of assignments, list of tests and exams, your labs, everything is by due date. So we can see everything. We can see a week at a glance, 2 weeks at a glance, and a month at a glance. we can understand what's actually going on and what's being asked of us. And those 45 hours, like you said, can be better organized if we have a clearer picture of this week is actually heavy in this course and it's a little bit lighter in this course. And that helps us to sort of see visually what's going on and to be able to, manipulate things and be better organized.
To juggle. And I think one of the things that we use a lot at Ruth Rumack's Learning Space, but also throughout the prep course, is color coding. I love color coding. We have color coding throughout the office for a number of different things. And it's very helpful to be able to see visually. You give each class, each course a different color. And then as you're blocking off time in your master schedule, you're using that color over and over and over again so that you can see visually when things are going to be tight, or when you have more of one course versus less of another.
Yeah, and I've worked with students personally, at RLS who, they have a color-coded system for their organization, and magically, beautifully, wonderfully, in the age of technology, they're able to match the folders on their computer with the same colors that are highlighted on their agenda. So if it's an orange folder on their computer, it's an orange highlight on their agenda, and that is science. And so it's just like visually everything is tied together. It's so easy to see when you color code things, and that just adds to, it's such an easy way of making things more organized without doing too much work.
It takes a little bit of setup, right? You have to put the time in at the beginning, but you're doing that in anticipation for making it easier for yourself in the long run.
Exactly.
Okay, I love this. So planning ahead, common challenge. How do we teach our students, how do we help our emerging adults to organize and prioritize these demands?
So one of the things we talk a lot about is, how to look at priorities and how to actually prioritize your tasks. I think, we're often just sort of not even taught, we're just expected to know this seems really important, so this should be at the top of my list.
This is more important than this.
Exactly. And I think students don't, it's hard. I don't want to say they don't quite understand it because, everybody is a little bit different, but I think talking it through and being able to identify what makes something a higher priority than something else is something that needs to be learned. So, looking at time-based tasks that have a specific due date, those usually rank higher up on the priority list than tasks that are equally important but don't have a set due date. So, just talking about those kinds of things and being able to organize a little bit that way, it helps to organize yourself, but it also helps you to understand where your flexibility is.
I agree. I think that, again, if we go back to the proactive side of things, that's something that as parents, we can be having those open conversations with as well, and modeling, saying, oh my goodness, I've got so much to do this weekend. What do I do first? What is the most important? Is the grocery shopping the most important, or is, paying the bills that I've neglected for 2 weeks more important? So we have to be able to discuss how we use our time as well. I mean, I have a 31-year-old at home and I have a 14-year-old at home. And with the 14-year-old, we're starting to talk a lot about, well, what is the priority? Is the priority going out with your friends on Saturday afternoon, or is the priority getting a jump on this essay that's due on Wednesday so that you're not stuck finishing it, Tuesday night at 11 o'clock? So the sooner we can have these conversations, the better, I think.
Sure. And I think that also ties into dispelling the myths. A lot of the myths come from, the adults in their lives who are sort of top down saying it's going to be this way. But I think a lot of it is also cultural, and that idea that some people thrive best doing their essay at 11 p.m. the night before it's due. Nobody thrives best that way. Some people thrive best with a close deadline, but not, the very night before when you need to go to sleep. So, just talking about those kinds of things and being open, having that self-reflection and being honest with yourself, I think is really important.
Yeah. Okay. So let's take a look at when we're breaking these ideas down, the flexible versus non-flexible. How else do we take ownership of the responsibilities or control the priorities? How do we break things down?
So yeah, I think it's really important to break down assignments. And like your example, an essay due on Wednesday is not just an essay due on Wednesday. It is an outline that needs to be done a week before. It's a first draft or it's research often that needs to be done before that outline. That outline Sometimes we need to have an annotated bibliography when we're talking about university courses that needs to be handed in way before the paper is actually due. So breaking down the individual tasks within an assignment is really helpful in terms of understanding where your time is. And oftentimes what we can do is, use some kind of like time-based apps and things like that. There's a lot of discussion of just using sort of a calendar that has specific times in it. So, at 7 p.m., I'm going to set aside an hour to work on an essay or something like that.
So we've got physical agendas. We could have, the writing in kind, the old fashioned kind. We can have a Google Calendar. We can have things that have alerts. What are some tools that we use that are really helpful with our students?
So the big one, obviously, is Google Calendar. It's really easily accessible on all devices. It also allows you to set notifications for yourself. And obviously, iCal is similar in terms of ease of use. But what that allows us to do is backwards planning. So we know that the essay is due on Wednesday. Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. So we know that by Monday we need to have our final draft ready for us, ready to be edited. And, for different people, that means different things, but to be able to move backwards like that really helps to show the big picture. We also obviously use, I think it's important to look sometimes at a hypothetical situation. So what students aren't always thinking of, or what your 14-year-old is not always thinking of is, what happens on Tuesday night if you really need to attend to something that you weren't expecting to attend to? As a 14-year-old, that's not likely to happen. As there's probably not something as important. Well, I shouldn't say that, but if you are looking at university, something might come up, a due date might be moved or something like that, and now you're scrambling to do two things at once. The other thing, like you said, is social activities. We thrive. We're social beings, and you're making new friends. They'll want to do things, and you need to be able to say, "I'd like to do that this weekend, but I've left everything to the last minute, so I can't."
Yeah,
you don't want to say that. I'm sorry, not you. You need to be able to say it. You don't want to say that.
You don't want to be in that situation.
Exactly.
Right. All right. So let's talk about, even with all of this proactive prep work, being in the moment can be challenging. The term moves very quickly and the demands are high. So what are some things that we can encourage, as parents, we can encourage our kids to be thinking about when they're in those moments of overwhelm?
So I think in terms of being active, I've said it a few times, but just being honest with yourself is key here. The term moves quickly. You will get your 5-course syllabi, and next week you have assignments due. And they'll usually be smaller assignments, but it's very different from high school, where you have sort of an ease back in period. You hit the ground running, and you really only have 3 months before the final. If it's a half-year course. So I think the thing that we can do as adults who work with kids, parents and educators, is really to have these open conversations and to ask pointed questions that are going to solicit answers that are going to be useful for us in terms of maneuvering with these kinds of stressors. So an example of a question, though, that I'll always ask a kid is, which one of your courses are you most excited about this term? And which one of your courses is causing you the most amount of stress when they get their syllabus at the beginning? And they'll usually say the one that has the most work, or the one that seems like, I don't understand anything in this course, is the one that's most confusing. And that's a pivotal moment. That's where we have to have a discussion, or just keep it in our back pocket and say, okay, this is something I need to keep my eye on. I need to circle back to this and check on how things are going. When we ask general questions, and, obviously for, all of elementary, middle school, and high school, asking, how's it going? How is school? You don't get the answers that you're looking for.
The answer is fine.
Fine. But the questions change by the time you get to university, because you're talking to an adult as the world sees that your child now. Versus, your child that is still your child. But, in their day-to-day life, they're treated as fully functioning, fully independent adults. And so, the questions that you ask need to be a little bit more sort of pointed, so that we can understand what's actually going on.
I think the conversations that I had with my older son when he was going through university, because of my background in education and my need to want to support him in any way that I could, the conversations, I had to pull myself back from trying to manage everything for him. And even when I could see, sort of the conversation was, he wasn't giving me the answers that I was looking for. And I was really like, well, when is that paper due? And do you think that maybe when do you think you'll be starting that paper? And what kind of research do you need to do for that paper? I at some point I had to pull back and say, okay, well, I can ask the questions, but I have to let him sort through the answers and get into a groove for himself. And for him, it took a few years, and it took a few semesters of taking a break and then coming back to it. And it took him a while to get through it, but he did. And when he got through it, he was able to look back and really see and feel his progress and feel empowered at all the new skills that he had learned, and how he had changed his approach. But it took a while. So I have to say to the parents out there, this is a process. And as we send our some of them are going to be 17, 18-year-olds off to post-secondary, there is a process for us as well, in terms of pulling back and letting them do their thing, but still being there as a safety net.
Sure. And
So
that allows us it allows so much. So we've talked about this. Good.
It does, yeah. So, all right, let's go back to that. I think for those students who may need a little more direction, what are some tools that will help keep them on track so that they can keep up with the demand?
Yeah, so I think there's three things really at the top of the list. Being clear with your goals is number one. Being able to manage your time, or learning to manage your time. We're all still learning, and having a clear system that you're following for everything that you're doing. Note taking, time management, making goals. That having a clear system that you're following through with everything.
Okay, so let's talk about goals. We do a lot of goal setting at Ruth Remax Learning Space, and we're big advocates of the SMART goals. And for those of you who don't know what a SMART goal is, a SMART goal can be used to create that big picture, long-term goals like, maintaining a certain GPA or how you're going to get into grad school. But they can also be really helpful for maintaining more immediate tasks like completing an essay or just studying, getting yourself motivated to study for midterms. So a SMART goal stands for S, be specific about what you want to achieve. What exactly will you accomplish? You need to be intentional about it. M is how will you measure the progress? Those would be the milestones. And A is achievable. Is this goal achievable? What makes you think so? Where are you now? Where do you want to be? What does that gap look like? So again, we're being very intentional and asking very pointed questions. And the last one second last one, is the goal relevant to you? Why does it matter? And there's a technique we use called the 5 whys. If you ask why 5 times in a row, you're digging deeper. So is this goal relevant to you? Why? And then you get an answer and you ask again, well, why? Why is that important? Or why does that matter? So you're digging deeper and deeper until you finally get to sort of the kernel of what makes it really relevant to that person. And relevance is really what's going to motivate somebody to get it done. If it's not relevant to you, most likely you're not going to follow through with it. And the last one, T, is timely. Is it a long-term goal, short-term goal? When will a goal be achieved? What are the checkpoints along the way? Give yourself that final date. And this is also what we were talking about in creating your calendar, is working backwards with specific dates so that you know where you are in that process.
Yeah, it's really helpful to be able to go through that with kids and to really identify what each of those things stand for, and like you said, explain how being intentional about the goals can really change the way that you achieve your goals, whether you do or not.
So if that's our first one, is having some type of goal setting system. The second one is staying on track, is managing your time. So what are some tools that we like to use to support time management?
So every kid is different, and it takes testing. It's trial and error with time management. But we use a lot of apps like Trello and Stay Focused. I mentioned Google Calendar already. There's a lot of backwards planning, and then there's sort of like the tried and true official methods of time management, like like the Pomodoro method, for
Right.
example.
I love the Pomodoro method. So for those of you who don't know about the Pomodoro method, it was research based in Italy. That's why they call it the Pomodoro, like the Pomodoro tomato. And it has a system. So you choose a single task to focus on for 25 minutes. You set a timer for 25 minutes. You work on that task. After 25 minutes, you take a 5-minute break, and then you repeat another 25 minutes again. You can also do a 50 minute time slot and then take a 10-minute break and then do another 50-minute time slot. But one of the things that I like about it is it is based on brain research, and it is based on sort of our optimal performance and how we work best as humans. And having that 5-minute break every 25 minutes, get up, stretch, take a snack, something healthy, hopefully, drink some water, move around. That's really important to keep us focused. And we know how our brains work best. We need to be hydrated, we need to be well fed, and we need to have some exercise. So building all of that into it and teaching our kids that this is part of study hygiene or good study habits is helpful.
And, I think we're working with, we ourselves now, and also the kids that we work with, we're really used to immediate gratification.
Uh-huh.
We can pick up our phone and open TikTok and watch a funny video, and that's immediate. And so, telling students, this is only 20 minutes, and then you get a break. It's a much more manageable task than I have to study for 3 hours tonight. And that can feel crushing. That can induce anxiety that doesn't go away and no studying happens. So just understanding that, like, there are ways to do this that aren't as daunting as they seem.
Yeah, break it up into small, manageable parts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. So that's the second aspect. The third aspect to staying on track is note-taking. And note-taking is a huge part of university life. And most students will not have been taught how to take notes formally or have been shown a variety of systems to use. But having a framework for taking notes and some of those techniques can be so helpful.
Yeah. And, like I said before, just being consistent with the way that you're doing things and having a system that's ready there for you. We expect students to be able to take notes when they're in class. And I think that's generally the time when they expect to be taking notes. And if you watch any TV or movie where there's a scene in a university, everybody has their MacBook open and they're typing. And that is not the best way to take notes in terms of the science behind learning. Really, when you're using your hand and you're writing pen on paper or pencil on paper, you are making neural connections that you're not doing with typing.
Yes.
So every kid is different. And obviously, for some kids, typing is better or more accessible. We want to be able to honor that. But at the same time, in the lecture is not the only time that they're taking notes. We're also taking notes while we're reading our course readings. We're taking notes while we are studying. So, there's other times when we need to be aware of what's going on. And if you're taking notes while you're studying and you're typing on your computer and that's not the best way for you to actually commit this to memory, again, there's some self-reflection that needs to happen. But, we also understand that kids don't really know how to take notes. They're sort of told, you write down the things that are the most important. And anytime in the post-secondary prep course that we ask them, what is good note-taking? The first answer is writing down what's important. And my question for that is, how do you know what's important when you're in your lecture? How do you know? Yeah. So, what we use is an acronym that we call LEARN. So, similar to sort of the SMART goal, the LEARN method. I'll put it up on the screen for a second. This is so listen and record is step one. So that is listening and writing down whatever notes you can. That is during the lecture or during, while you're studying. The next is going back to it as soon as you're done, as soon as the lecture lets out, you are going back to your notes and rereading them and editing so that it's fresh in your mind. And you can say, oh yeah, I remember when my professor said that. What I didn't write down was this next part. So that's the editing piece. The next is ask a friend. This is somebody you trust, not your best friend who you're going to slack off with. To swap notes, you can see what they've written, they can see what you've written, and you mesh them together. Then you revise. so that you have cleaner notes that are more complete. And our last step is neatify, which is not really actually a word, according to Google, but I like it because we are taking this and we are making it neat. So sometimes that means just rewriting your notes. Sometimes it means changing the format of your notes to better suit what's actually going on with the task at hand. So, if you're studying for a test, neatifying your notes sometimes means taking the main ideas or the important things that you've now identified because you've gone through it so many times and putting it into point form. So this is just on the screen also some examples of different kinds of note taking. We have, mind maps. We have things in different sizes and colors. We have sort of a more standard one up here that's just like a bullet point list, but just practicing how to take notes and understanding that there's more to it than just writing things down is really important to understanding what's going on with it and how to do it well.
And this is something that kids really should be exploring before they get to university, so that they do have the chance to figure out what works for them and what doesn't, as opposed to doing that trial and error in that first semester of class, which is not the best time to do it. It's going to happen. We're going to have to do some trial and error anyway, but it's about, doing a little bit of that practice beforehand.
Absolutely. And, I think something that's really a wonderful idea, but tends to actually hurt students in some ways is in high school and university, they're often given a printout or a copy of the slides of the day. So here are the slides of what we talked about. And oftentimes a lot of what's important is not on the slide. If we make a slideshow, we're not putting word for word what we're saying. We're putting a funny image with a header and maybe a few bullet points. So, having a copy of that and feeling like that's your safe space, and that's where I don't even really need to take many notes because I have this copy. It's something that needs to be unlearned before students start to rely on it too much in university and then realize that they're not ready for exams.
There's one thing that we tell our students a lot is that if the professor has talked about it and you have it in your lecture notes, and then your TA has talked about it in, a lab or in the secondary class, and you've seen it in your class readings, that sort of synergy of all of the different reminders, that's a big flashing red light that says this is probably very important and you should pay attention to the fact that it's been repeated many, many times. So little tricks like that, just to get kids to sort of to attune their ear and their being able to notice and think ahead, be proactive about what might be coming up on a midterm or on an exam.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to move now from, we've talked about the being proactive, what we can do ahead of time, being active and engaged in the learning in the moment. And we want to talk a little bit about being reactive. Now, despite all the best laid plans and some stellar studying techniques, sometimes our kids are going to come up against some real struggles. And how will we recognize when our child is struggling?
So I think it's important to note first that, there will be struggle in university. Every university student will face some struggle at some point, and oftentimes it's ongoing, depending on the level of academics that they're undertaking. But we know that it can be a good thing. There can be some resilience. We can learn from that struggle, but we also know that struggle can very quickly turn into crisis, and that's really what we want to avoid. So I think we need to be really intentional about making a struggle plan. So what we want to really look at is being aware of not just as parents, but also, your kids, their peers should be aware of these things as well. What are the common signs of, severe anxiety or depression, withdrawal from, the activities that they usually enjoy doing, change in appetite, change in sleep habits, giving up on things, extreme emotions, just being tuned into those things so that we're able to say, okay, something is going on. And, I think it's also worth talking about what we do when we say something is going on.
Yeah, I think this idea of a struggle plan is, again, one of those conversations that you might want to have with your child before they're off for the first term, so that we know there is a continuum of a challenge, being overwhelmed, high stress, to struggle, and then to crisis. And we want to address these issues and support the student at the earliest stages so that it doesn't escalate to the crisis. But if it does get there, we have a list of people. We have a list of professionals, we have a list of student services, we have a list of resources to go to in order to help that moment.
And I think, it's also, obviously worth talking about promoting self-care to begin with. So, staying active, eating well, practicing good hygiene, sleeping well. But, like you said, all the best laid plans, there can still be, catastrophe. So knowing what that struggle plan looks like, beyond, I would say beyond, the services on campus and, those kinds of things, is really knowing which friends and family can already expect you to possibly reach out to them if something is going on. And I think it's fair to have somebody, I think, Ruth, when we were talking earlier, you mentioned like if you were applying for a job and you didn't tell the person that you put them down as a reference, it would be weird. Similarly, like, if you don't tell your close friend that you may call them in a crisis, they might say like, I can't deal with this right now. But even if that's the case, they know that there's a chance that it might happen, and they've had some time to think about how they might deal with it.
It's a little bit like a buddy system too.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk, let's talk about learning exceptionalities. At RLS, we work with many neurodivergent university students and a wide variety of exceptionalities. And when you're making that transition from high school into post-secondary, as an individual with particular learning needs, we have to do some extra work. We have to be a little more proactive. We have to search out those institutions that are going to support us and give us what we need. And we can choose which institutions we want to apply to, often based on the level of accommodation or accessibility, or just the feeling that you get being a student with exceptionalities on campus. So I think the conversation we have to have with our kids a little bit, before they make their decision to go to university is, what accommodations do you think you're going to need? What are you getting right now in high school? What's helpful and what is allowing you to be successful? What things are not so helpful, or what things are just not available to you that may be available to you at the university level? And one of the things I want to stress to parents is that the universities have incredible student services and accessibility departments, far greater than what we have available to us in high school. And it is often, it's without stigma. The doors are open. There are resource centers and various centers across the campuses for different needs. And it's something that I think as a university student who needs some accommodations, it will be a welcome change from the high school situation. One of the things I do want to let parents know is that if you are going to apply to university and you're asking for accommodations, they will need a current psychoeducational evaluation. And current in most universities, to my knowledge, means 2 years old. Some are saying even up to 5 years old, but most of them want the psychoed to have taken place after the age of 16 or 17, because they need the psychoed to be based on the adult version and not the child version. So what do we want to do? We want to communicate with that accessibility service office early. We want to make sure that the student is comfortable with the people at that office. And even though at the university level, the client is the student or the emerging adult, our children, they, a parent, especially of a student who needs some certain accommodations, should get involved. So in some cases, we're saying step back, let the kid be on their own, and give them the space to flourish. In this situation, I think as parents, we do have to take a little bit of the initiative and help that student get organized. We do know, that a child with ADHD or somebody with executive functioning challenges is generally 2 to 3 years behind in their maturity. And we have to keep that in mind when we're helping them get all of this stuff organized and ask for the things that they want. But so some of the accommodations that are offered at the university level would be volunteer note taking. So somebody else in the class will take the notes for the student, so the student can just listen. And even though this kind of goes against what we were saying in our note taking section, it's for some individuals with either processing speed challenges or memory challenges, it's very difficult, or dysgraphia, writing and hearing and listening and thinking and computing all at the same time can be really difficult. So if anybody is struggling with that, there is a note-taking service that's available. We know that universities all have accessible classrooms. They also have things called a cue sheet or a memory aid. So you can't write all your notes on there, but you can certainly write things that are going to jog your memory to help you answer questions in any type of assessment, midterms or exams. Alternate formats for books. So it could be something in Braille, it could be a read to you software, a text to speech software, even things like ergonomic seating and a reduced course load can be asked for in the accessibility student services. And then in terms of assistive technology accommodations, again, lots more things available to you as a student at the university level. There are things like a recording pen for taking notes, something
It's
like—
so cool. If you have a chance to, it is so cool.
I love it. I'll give you a quick—
Sorry to interrupt you, but it's so cool. It has timestamps from where you're writing and
Yeah.
while it's listening, so that it matches up later. Like when you listen to it and read it back, it's there. It's timestamped. It's wild.
So it's a pen, and it has a recorder on one end and it has an actual pen on the other, and you use it on special dot paper. And basically what it does is once you start recording, it's recording the voices, and it's also got a camera on the pen side. So it's seeing what you're writing at the time that it's recording that text. And then you upload all of that, and the notes that you've written by hand come up on the screen, and it also correlates with the recording that was done, the auditory recording. So if you can't take notes, but you want to remember something as you hear it, you would just write number 1. And that's all you have to write, because then when it uploads, you're going to see the number 1, and then it's going to correspond with what was being said at that point. So you don't need to take full notes, but you do need to sort of give yourself clues as to important parts of that lecture. So that's just one thing. And then you've got all sorts of access to all types of other speech recognition software, reading software, annotated readings, all kinds of mind mapping stuff. It's really quite incredible. So in that way, I would say that it's really beneficial for that student to have the conversation with the student accessibility, the accessibility offices, and to get to know who their direct officer will be ahead of time, so that they can feel comfortable. And in many cases, it becomes their second home, where they're going for maybe essay writing help, or they're going for note-taking help, or they're going for just to check in, somebody who's helping them keep on track and stay organized.
And I think it's also worth repeating, there is no stigma in terms of asking for those services. Every student services advisor that we spoke to when we were putting together the post-secondary prep course said, it's our job to do this, and it's our job because we love doing it. And they're excited to find resources for these kids that actually help them. So if something doesn't work, they're like, let's try this. It is really just a wonderful, wonderful, supportive environment. But, in terms of being proactive, in terms of talking to those people beforehand, and I think, it's really important to know their schedules get full, their course loads or the amount of work that they're doing in a term, the student services, workers, they get full, they get busy. And so if you go to them, a week before something is due with a crisis, even with all hands on deck, there's only so much that they can do for you. If they know in advance that this is coming down the line, and they know there's a little bit of stress building here, that is something that they can carve out for themselves, and they know that they're anticipating.
Yeah.
But,
Well, we have something else to share. Which,
we do in the website that sort of breaks down the
let's share that.
Yeah. So this is a website that looks at many universities, not all universities, but many universities and what kinds of accessibility options they have. This is really for students with disabilities. So it covers physical disabilities as well as, LDs, so learning difficulties, but it really goes through all of the different resources that are available at these universities. And it's really helpful if, as a family, you're looking at this and saying, we really wanted McMaster University. And now that we're looking at their services, it doesn't actually seem like this is a place where we're going to thrive. And so oftentimes it does help to make a decision by looking at the information that's provided here.
I'm just going to say it out loud. It's transitionresourceguide.ca. All one word, transitionresourceguide.ca.
Yeah, at the bottom here.
Yep. Thank you. We put it into the chat.
Okay.
All right. So it's important that students learn to advocate for themselves. While the student, as we said, is the university's client, parents can step in and get the ball rolling, especially when we have children with particular needs. And remember that our emerging adults with ADHD and executive function challenges will often present with their maturity a little younger than their actual age. And we had a chat, somebody put in the chat. Sharon asks, do you have this resource for colleges? I believe that the colleges are on there as well. Isn't that correct?
They are, yes. So there's a separate page for colleges. Again, it's not all colleges, but they have, especially the more well-known or the more popular ones are certainly on there.
Yeah. So thank you. That's, yeah. George Brown. I'm pretty sure that George Brown is in there.
Yeah.
So, and then if they're not, I mean, again, it's just about picking up the phone, getting to the right department, which is the accessibility office, and making an appointment to go and see them and see what they have to offer.
Yeah.
Okay, Dan.
I want to, because I'm excited about it. It's been 3 years since we put together the post-secondary prep course, but I just want to talk a little bit about it and how we sort of touch on some of the things that we've talked about tonight within that course. So I'll share my screen. I have a couple things that I just want to mention.
And while you're doing that, Dan, I'm going to just put out there, if anybody has any further questions that we haven't already answered, put them into the chat and we'll talk about them in just a few minutes.
Yeah. So, really, when we put this together, it was a few of us, the senior learning specialists and associate directors of education who put this together. And what we really saw was that there was a need to fill in some gaps where kids were. And part of working with older adolescents or emerging adults is knowing that, a top-down approach is not what they're looking for. A teacher saying, here is how you take notes. Is going to, it's going to result in some eye rolls. And really what we're doing here with this is working in a small group with, kids who are all in the same boat. They're all starting university in a couple months. They're all sort of a little bit nervous about some things and excited about some things. And they have a chance to talk and reflect within that small group about what's going on. So they end up feeling empowered about what they're doing. They know that they're going to be able to thrive in their new environment. We obviously talk about, the sort of big talking points that we mentioned in this webinar. But one of the really great things is that for every strategy or every focus point that we look at, there's a take home or a giveaway for it so that they can use that when they're in university. So, we're talking about putting together a calendar for, adding all of your syllabi into one place. That template is then given to the kids who are in the university or the post-secondary prep course. It's already, ready to go with different color coordination. So as soon as they get their syllabi, they don't have to worry about creating something or creating a document that looks a certain way. They can just start plugging in their information into this document. So we want to give them something to take with them so that they're able to not just be proactive, but also active when the time comes.
Yeah, I love it. I'm very excited about the course also because it's all of these pieces are things that we have done sort of individually with students at different times, but this was our opportunity to bring them all together so that we could share it as one big, juicy bunch of information. And as you said, have our students leave with a whole set of tools and strategies ready to go as soon as they arrive on campus.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So I'm going to open it up to questions. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to type it into the chat. And if you don't have a question, I would love to hear one of your takeaways. Was there something that sparked your interest this evening that made sense to you, or something that you hadn't thought of before? I'd love a little bit of feedback as we go. That makes it personable to me as well. So while we do that, there was one question that came in ahead of time, which was about how do you help a child, an emerging adult who may suffer from some social anxiety, and they're concerned about them making friends and becoming integrated in the campus in that way. And some of our ideas for that is, really to explore the clubs, because universities have literally hundreds and hundreds of clubs, and everything from manga club, yoga clubs, Dungeons and Dragons club, like all sorts of different things for different art clubs and photography clubs and writing clubs, everything that you can possibly imagine, because they are run by the students, and the students have varying, interests.
It's extremely niche as well. When you look at the list, you're like, whoa, I never thought that there would be a group for that.
Yes.
Exactly. Overlapping interests and identities.
Exactly. So I think that if you take the time to go through that with your child who may have some social anxiety, if they can find that one little place that they feel comfortable, and that becomes the place that helps them to build their confidence, that can be a real game changer for them. And then that confidence grows, or they meet people at that club, and then they meet people through that person, etc. I also think that the Accessibilities Office also hosts different meetups in different ways. So if they're not feeling comfortable doing it on their own, they could do it through the Office of Accessibility, and with a counselor or somebody that they're already familiar with.
Yeah.
Okay.
There was another question here that came in. If there's 2 children of different levels, will the course be suitable? So I would say, the course is geared towards students who are at the end of their grade 12 year, who are starting university in the fall. We expect that most of the kids who are registered for the course in the summer already have a chosen school that they'll be attending in the fall. That being said, we have had kids join who are between grades 11 and 12. It's certainly helpful for those kids. And, a lot of the strategies and skills that we're talking about are still applicable to high school, note-taking and those kinds of things. But, we do cater the discussions towards the school that they'll be attending. So what we often ask those kids is, what's your top school? You're going to go with that. That's the school you're going to research during this period. But it certainly is, it is a course that's designed for kids who are 16 and above. I wouldn't turn away a kid who's between grade 11 and 12. I would say a kid that's between grade 10 and 11, the emotional maturity to talk about some of these things may not quite be there. The other question that was part of this was whether the course is recorded. Unfortunately, we can't record courses with students because once they get uploaded to the internet, we have to have permission from every single family in order to do that. But if courses are missed, if a specific date is missed, what we can do is send the materials from that day so that they can look through the materials themselves.
Yep, they can do it as a DIY for that particular day. Great. We have another comment. It's been, oh, I lost it. Hold on. There we go. It's been very helpful to think about familiarizing with university resources ahead of time. I'm so glad that you recognize that for yourself. I found that really helpful. In when I'm working with students and trying to help them make their decisions, we take a little tour around the university virtually, and it helps them picture themselves there or not, depending on what we find. There's another question. I have 17 and 19 both headed to post-sec in the fall. We would miss the first session as we are away. Okay, if that's the case, I'm sure that we could work something out to make sure that they had the work to do and that they could catch up. Part of the course is that group discussion and working together as a group, but perhaps you could do it as a family, and you could get that, again, those discussion points started so that they wouldn't miss the beginning. We can certainly talk about it. And I would say, if you are interested, to call the office, 416-925-1225, or send us an email, ruthrumack info@ruthrumac.com. I'm like, what is my email again? Info@ruthrumac.com. And we can set up a phone call and tell you more about the course and figure out if the timing doesn't work for you, we can find a way to work around it.
And, if there are other questions just about accessibility services or, more specific questions about your kid and an individual case, I'm certainly happy to have a conversation with you about, the options that are out there and things that you can be looking for before, before they start university or once they start university. The phone lines are open, as they would say.
Always, we're always available, always available. And Susan says that it's helpful to know how accommodating a university can be and how to research all of that too. Oh, we got another one. Excellent. And Sharon says, thank you. Well, thank you. Thank you for joining us. And again, as Dan said, if you have any other questions, if you want more information, if something sparked a question that you can't find an answer to elsewhere, just pick up the phone, send us an email. We're always available. As you can see, we love to chat. We have lots of information on the subject and we would love to share more with you. So Dan, thank you so much for your time and for your expertise and sharing all this good stuff with us. And I'm really looking forward to meeting the new crop of kids from our summer class.
Definitely. Thank you for hosting. It's been a great conversation. And like I said, if anybody has any more questions, I'm all ears. I'm happy to help.
Wonderful. Thanks, everybody.
Have
a good evening.
Long weekend.
Yes. Enjoy.
Take care.